be intentional as to where you put your attention every day, everything you do. When it comes to a security product where a person is going to put their own valuables in it, brand is much more important because now I want to know that what I bought that for, it's going to use. And I may not be as comfortable with it if it's an off-brand Chinese product versus a well-known American brand, even if it is made in China. Okay, more people have to be strategic about who they want to partner with, or if you want to use the term sell, because not everybody is a good fit to be your customer. I can pick up a phone and call and go see and have a relationship with that isn't just business. And that to me at the end, it's not the businesses we built, it's not the money we made, it's the people. You know, the rest of it you can't take with you.
Hey, sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to ask a massive favor of you guys. At the moment, we're putting a big priority on growing our YouTube channel. So if you aren't already subscribed to us there, if you could head over to YouTube, type in the Quest for Success podcast, or just click the link down in the show notes below, head over to our channel and subscribe to us there. You'll get access to all of our video interviews that we do with our guests. And it will do us a massive favor because it will help us grow the show, which means we can get on bigger and better guests for you guys. And with that, back to the episode. All right, welcome back to the Quest for Success podcast, and thanks for tuning in once again. Today we have a friend of the show on, Mr. Bob Mosbaugh, and he's been in the managing global consumer security brands for over 25 years, and so we're really keen to kind of dive into his story and his journey and get some of the learnings from it.
Yeah, so I had the opportunity to meet Bob probably well over 10 years back through a mutual friend. And since then, we met each other for a few times here in Sydney as well as in LA. And I was really interested in every time I see Bob, was so keen to talk to him because I can learn so much from him every time I speak to him. And he's a master of business development. And I picked many things from him over the years. So we are so much looking forward to talk to him today. Thank you, Bob, for joining us.
Thank you. You're too kind. And I have to correct the 25 years. It's actually been 44 years.
Wow.
So it's a little bit older. So,
Wow.
yes.
Well, you're
That
even
wasn't
more
all
experienced.
security, but a lot of it was security.
Yeah.
So all consumer products to global market. So.
Amazing.
Awesome. We'll dive into that. But I suppose before we begin, Bob, this podcast is all about success. And so we need to understand the fundamental, which is, what does success actually mean to you?
What does success mean to me? Well, it's changed a lot. So interestingly, when I was a lot younger, success was more about climbing that corporate ladder and running the company and making money and a lot of those things. And now I'm at a point where it's more about how do I give back? So I've been blessed a lot through my career. So now I look at ways with what I do where I still want to help myself, but what's more important to me is help other people in their pursuits of whatever it might be. So I'm really trying to do more and more of that it's more about helping others and helping myself at this point.
And I suppose for us to understand the Bob that's sitting in front of us, we need to understand a little bit about your early life. Can you take us through kind of where you grew up and how you think your parents and those around you in your formative years have shaped who you've become today?
Yeah, very, very good question. So I was the youngest of four children, but there were four children within 5 years. My mom and dad were married at 15 and 16, and I was my mom's fourth and she was 21. So
Wow.
we basically grew up as siblings in the household. So mom and dad weren't a lot older. My mom did not drive until she was 38 years old. I was almost out of high school at that point and ready to go off on my own. So we grew up in a very close household. With my siblings, we were all very competitive. And the most interesting thing that I've come to really understand later in life is my mom, although she didn't have a lot of self-confidence, she instilled self-confidence in all of her children. She made us believe that whatever we believed we could do, that there was always a way to achieve it. My dad, on the other hand, was a very critical person. So whatever you did wasn't necessarily good enough. So with him, I always felt excellence was expected, never rewarded. So if you live in a world where your mom thinks you can do anything, but whatever you do isn't good enough for dad, you're continually pushing to do more. So you tend maybe not to be as satisfied with where you are, and you're really trying to reach the next level, whatever that might be. And as I got older in life, it was more to appreciate where I am, what I've accomplished, and things like that. So career wise, it was interesting. I started right out of college. I went for an interview with what I thought was going to be an insurance company. And it turned out that it was a headhunter. And in the meeting with the headhunter, he said, "You don't want to work for an insurance company." He said, "You're a sales guy." He said, "You need to find a sales company." So he told me about Stanley Tools, and he said that there was a position not far from where I was living at the time. This was in Northern California at that time. I had graduated from UCLA just about a month prior, and I'd moved north to live with my brother. And I'm in Northern California, and um, as as he tells me about Stanley Tools, I always grew up working with tools and building things, and I thought that would be a perfect fit for me. So I went on the interview, or I had scheduled the interview, and they called me the night before the interview. And they said, "We're really sorry that position's no longer available," without giving me any more notice. And because it's been so many years, I'll share the reason why. What I found out later is that in all of Stanley Tools, they had about 50 something consumer sales representatives. And out of those 50, they had one female. And they had just fired the one female, and that was the position I was going to take.
Mhm.
Well, she threatened to sue them, and instead of going through the lawsuit, they told her she could keep the job, and they told me sorry. So I
Mhm.
went back to the headhunter, and he said, "Gee, there's other options. I know that there's something open with Procter and Gamble. Why don't I set up an interview for you as quickly as we can?" He set one up, and the call from Stanley came on a Wednesday. And on Thursday, we're talking, and he sets up a interview for me with Procter and Gamble. I think it was the following Wednesday or Thursday. Well, that afternoon, he calls me back, and he said, "What would you think about moving to Denver, Colorado?" I said, "Why would I go to Denver?" And he said, "Well, Stanley called back and they really would like to hire you. And there's an opportunity in Denver. And would you be interested? I could set up something, after you go to Procter and Gamble." And I said, "No, I want to go there first. So I want to see what they have, and then I'll go to Procter and Gamble because I think I understand the company. I just want to find out what it is in Colorado." So he gets me to talk to the regional manager in Colorado, and he said, "We'd like to interview." And I said, "Great. Why don't we do it Friday?" He goes, "You mean day after tomorrow?" Or it was actually the next day. I said, "Yes." So let's do it tomorrow. He goes, "Why?" And I said, "Well, I have an interview with Procter and Gamble, and I want to give you guys a fair chance before I go there."
Mhm.
And he says, "Okay, let me see what we can do." So anyway, he schedules a flight. I'm on a plane the next morning. I go out there, and it just so happened that the regional manager was there as well. So I interview with both of them, and by the end of the day, I'm about ready to head back to the airport, and they hadn't made any offers or anything. So here I am. I'm actually only 20 years old at this point. So I
Wow.
was young when I went to college. I'm 20 years old. And I looked at him, I said, "So you're going to offer me a job or not? I didn't come out here, just to talk." And I think they were kind of surprised about that. They knew I was young. They didn't know how young. Anyway, they ended up saying yes and everything. And the next week we started doing paperwork. And 2 weeks later, I moved to Colorado. But when we did the paperwork, it was interesting because Stanley had a policy that they wouldn't hire anybody under 21.
Oh,
And this was September, and I wouldn't turn 21 till November. But at the time, and still true in America, you can't ask a candidate their age. So they couldn't ask me my age, but once they had offered me the job, they couldn't refuse the job because of my age, because that would be age discrimination too. So they had to let me keep the position, and I did. So it turned out fine. But I ended up with Stanley for about a year and a half. And when I was working there, I took care of retail customers. You got to imagine a guy out of California goes to Colorado. I'd never seen it snow before. So snow is something new to me. And I get there in the fall, and I remember the first snowstorm. I called my boss at the time and I said, so what do I do? He said, what do you mean, what do you do? And I said, well, do I drive in this? He goes, of course you drive in this. Have you never been in snow? And I said, no, I've never been in the snow. So he's kind of astounded by that. He says, well, I'll come over and give you some driving lessons. So he gave me a few driving lessons and everything. And anyway, so that was pretty fun. But even better yet was the first day that I was to go to his office for training. I said, well, how do I dress? He said, well, you come casual. Well, if you take a Southern California kid that grew up on the beaches and went to UCLA and every day going to school was flip-flop shorts and a Hawaiian shirt, well, casual to me was my flip-flops, my shorts, and my Hawaiian shirt. So I show up at the office at Stanley for my first day in shorts and flip-flops.
Oh,
He takes a look at me. That was pretty funny. And even to this day, I'll run into him every once in a while. And the first thing he'll do is look at my feet to see if I have shoes on. So it was kind of a fun start, but I was with them a year and a half, and I had actually gotten contacted by a headhunter to go to a wonderful opportunity in Oregon. And when Stanley found out about it, they started countering opportunities for me. But the problem with Stanley was at that time, I'm 21 years old now and almost 22 when we started talking. And my boss was, I think, 30. His boss was 35. So I'm saying there's nowhere for me to go here. So there was another company called Omark Industries, and they were based in Oregon, and they were the makers of Oregon Saw Chain, and they made about 80% of the chain for chainsaws and chain for bicycles in the world. So they were very well known, but they were starting a new division, and it was called Credo, which was a power tool accessory company. And this was a phenomenal opportunity for me because I went in as a marketing manager. And at that point, we were really involved with doing a lot of product development. And in fact, we developed a four-tooth saw blade that costs substantially less than a normal carbide saw blade. It was more in line with the price of a steel saw blade. And it would last 10 times longer than a steel blade, but was priced at about the same thing. That put us on the map. We continued to do innovative products. And at that time, we were taking on the likes of Black& Decker, Vermont American, people like that. And through that company, they gave me several promotions. And the time that I was there, I did everything from marketing management, international sales, OEM sales, national sales. So they gave me a lot of opportunity, but that company went up for sale. And when I stayed for a year while it was for sale, and they had said that if we stay a year and they still don't sell it, that they would double our income if we stayed at least a year. So took that money and then I ended up leaving because it didn't seem like anybody was going to buy it. And I went to work in a family business, and it was a somewhat security company because they did low voltage wiring for newly built homes, and at that time it was only for telephone pre-wire. And then we did a lot of custom homes where we were doing phone systems in large custom homes, like we did Buzz Aldrin's home. We did Georgia Front. He was the one on the moon. We did Georgia Frontier, the owner of the Los Angeles Rams. We did William Lyon of William Lyon Homes, and he also owned an airline company. So we're doing a lot of very high-end people. But what I looked at that company is we're pulling this wire. What else could we pull at the same time to turn into money? So we ended up going into security and started selling security systems. So these were hardwired monitored security systems. We would contract out to a third party to do the monitoring. And those were actually an asset where it had a value for every home that you had wired that you had a contract on for service. So that was a fastly growing business opportunity. We also started doing central vacuum systems. And then in the very early days, we were doing sound systems, surround sound and things like that. We actually, for William Lyon, I'll never forget this. So he, ex-military guy, owned a big building company, owned an airline company. I'm in his home training him on his new system. And we bring the projector TV down and we're projecting it up. He's got this really good sound. And this is at the time when the first Top Gun movie came out.
Mm-hmm.
And we're watching the movie with him with this incredible sound. And when Tom Cruise early in the movie starts flying upside down above the Meg and flips off the Russian Meg, He goes, he can't do that. Their tails would be hitting. So he's tearing it apart because he knows planes couldn't do
Yeah.
that. So that was just interesting. But anyway, so I ended up working for the family business and put them in a lot of different businesses. In about a year and a half's time, we more than doubled that business. But my aunt and uncle were having some marital issues. I didn't want to stick around, and Vermont American had bought my former company. And they asked if I would come back. And when they did ask me, they actually had about 20 different manufacturing facilities, primarily in the southern US. And my job was to look at those facilities and to see what products that the brand Credo was buying from offshore, what could we take and start purchasing from the domestic factories. So we started doing that. We worked more with innovating the product and everything. And then they ended up selling to Skill Saw, and Sears Craftsman was a part of that purchase. Sears was one of the owners. And all of a sudden, Emerson Electric was in on it. And all of a sudden, it was going to be a great big conglomerate that I didn't want any part of. So I got an opportunity to leave that and help one of my customers from Credo, who was a Canadian based company. I helped them launch their program into the US market. Why don't I take a breath and see if you have any questions up to this point before I go to that chapter and on?
I
No.
suppose I just want to touch on, you said in the beginning, when you were
Yes,
in that first interview, the person said, no, you're not built for insurance. You should be in sales. Where do
yes.
you think those sales skills came from?
When I was a kid, I started my own company at, I don't know, I was 11 or 12 years old. I had had paper routes and things like that, and those were fine. But there was a retirement community near my home. And I learned some great lessons there. I advertised in the local paper. It was called Leisure World, and they had a private paper for just their community. It was a 65 plus community. And I would ride my bike there, and if they were going on vacation, I'd water their flowers. If they wanted primroses or whatever planted, I'd plant their flowers. If they wanted me to come in the house and clean their toilets or vacuum their house or
Hmm.
polish their brass, I would do that too. And many of them became very dear friends, and I knew many of them until the day that they passed. One of them, in fact, was very special to me. Her name was Mildred Townsend, and her husband Scott, but what a great couple. And she gave me a lot of really good life lessons. But I think one of the best things she ever said is I'm working with her when I'm junior high school playing sports. And you get injured, and when you're a young boy, being tough is playing with the injury and playing through it. So like I had broke a finger one time, and one doctor told me I was going to be out for a few weeks. Well, I knew of another doctor, and I went to him, and he just grabbed a football and he taped my finger to the shape of a football. I was a center, and he said, "You can still play." So, I was fine. And I broke a foot, and he cut my shoe and put a soft cast on and taped my shoe around the cast so I could
Wow.
still play. Well, they looked at that, as a kid, you think you're being smart, you're being tough, and all those things. Well, now that I'm a lot older, I feel that I should have listened to what they told me because they said, be good to the old man you're going to be. So all those injuries that I had before, they hurt a lot more today than what they did back then.
Hmm.
So you really learn that. It doesn't matter if you're 5 years old, 15 years old, or 50 years old. That's very good advice for anybody. So, yeah.
And I suppose kind of going into that next chapter of your story,
Yeah.
where did you go from there?
Well, from selling that, if there were paper out and there were contests, there were sales of sell candy at school. I was winning the contest all the time, selling the most. I guess I kind of had a gift of gab, telling stories,
Hmm.
and that's paid well with me through the years. In fact, the headhunter that helped me get the sales job, I don't know that I recall this exactly right, but I think when he said, "What do you think your greatest asset is?" And I said, "Probably my mouth." And he looked at me kind of surprised. And I said, well, I said, I relate to people. And I said that I think my verbal skills are pretty good. And I said, so I don't care if I'm with a younger person or an older person, I think I can blend in. And I look back and I think that a lot of those elderly people that I worked with, that was very helpful. I think growing up as somebody in the church, that was very helpful. Having a competitive family where you have to speak up for yourself and establish your position. All those things were important. So yeah, we're absolutely a creature of those things that created us, and we keep developing as we go further.
I have a question. Like, you grown in a family, your parents were so young, right?
Yes.
What was your relationship like with your mom and dad? Like, because it's like they're like more of a elder sister or elder brother to you.
Yeah, so my best recollections, and it's hard, we we didn't spend during the weekdays and stuff a lot with our parents because we did everything with each other. My dad worked, my mom worked, and my grandmother came and lived with us. My grandfather had died in an auto accident when I was probably, I don't know, 6 or 7. My grandmother came to live with us. So my grandmother became more the matriarch of the family. Good news, bad news. She was a wonderful woman. She would do things, you come home from school and she'd have donuts on the table for you and this and that. But it would also be when I was in high school, if I went out, my parents told me to be home at 11. And the next morning, my mom would say, "What time did you get home?" And I'd say, probably 11:10, 11:15. My grandmother would chime in, "No, it was about 11:35."
Yeah.
Things like that. So she became kind of the, you
Motherly
couldn't get
figure.
away with anything. So we probably ended up being better kids because she was there all the time. But also, I would say with my mom and dad that my dad loved the outdoors and loved to travel. So the fact through my work, I found ways to travel. I think he instilled that in me an awful lot from an early age. We used to take a family vacation every year that would be 3 to 4 weeks, and we would drive. So we drove all the way to from California. We drove one time all the way to Niagara Falls in New York. We drove
Wow.
another time to when the Astrodome was just finished, and we just landed on the moon. We went to NASA and took a tour, and we went to the Astrodome and took a tour. That was another trip. Another one, we went up to Canada, British Columbia, and Portland, Oregon, Washington. We did that trip. We spent 2 weeks one time just in the state of Arizona, looking at Indian ruins and historical things. So he was that way. My mom was more, she would go as long as she didn't have to do anything. So she didn't want to cook, she didn't want to clean, she didn't want to take care of anything. We all had to do all that, dad and the 4 kids, and my mom would go to enjoy it. So, because it was her vacation. So I think it worked out well. We got exposed to a lot because of it. I've actually, with my parents, probably got 35 of the U.S. states. And today I've been to all 50 U.S. states. I've been in every Canadian province. And I think the count's nearing 70. I think it's 68 countries now, something like that, that I've been able to travel to. So I feel blessed with that.
I suppose, Bob, moving forward to your time at Cisco, where you were leading there as the COO, I
Correct.
suppose being in a large organization like that and being quite high up in it, are there any like key lessons that you had from that experience?
Well, there's a lot of lessons. So when we say a big company, I was still in a privately held company. So anytime when you're in a privately held company, and I really think it goes wherever you're always beholden to somebody. You
Mm.
never really run the show. You're going to have investors, you're going to have money people, you're going to have a board of directors. You always have somebody. So I think a lot of times people think that the top guy gets to make all the decisions. No, you're normally making the harder decisions. You're trying to create vision for your company. You're trying to look at the world as it is and what's happening in the macro or microeconomic world that you either need to protect your business from or you can use it opportunistically, strategically to go advance your business. So it's more thinking at a high level and not getting down at the weeds and finding the right people to get down into the weeds for you. But when you're in a privately held company, you'll sometimes have your money person having you pursue things that are contrary to what you think would be best for the business. So it's a balance. So you have to, and I believe that's anywhere you work. You need to balance what you think is best to whoever you report to. And like I said, I don't care who you are, you're always reporting to somebody. So,
And I suppose in terms of that, at that company, you were kind of in a leadership role. What do you
yes.
think it is one of the most important traits to be an effective leader?
Um, Another great question. So I think there's a lot of things, but in a smaller company, because when I was there, it started smaller. So when I got there, it was, I don't know, $6 or $8 million. By the time I left, we were about $90 million. So we grew up pretty rapidly. And through that growth, when you're small, you are a hands-on leader. And
Hmm.
I think you do more through example. That if I work hard, you're going to feel like you need to work hard too. I think it's a lot better for me to be working hard and look for those around me to work hard also, as opposed for me to work a 4 hour day and expect them to work 10 hours. So you have to lead by example. I think that's number
Absolutely.
one. Yeah. And then I think you need a couple breaks, I think, as you're going. I think if you look at anybody that's gotten into a leadership role, I think you create your opportunities. I think sometimes you're lucky, but you're only going to be lucky if you're good also. But it's what are the big breaks that you get that set you apart that let you climb that ladder within your business? And I can look at every company and I can say that there were key shifts that happened in those businesses that let me put my handprint on the business where I really helped shift that business, pivot that business, do something to enable that business to grow a lot more. If it was my uncle's business early on, it was the ability to go outside of just telephone pre-wire and entering something like your security systems that gave you an actual asset, or to go do, your sound systems or your vacuum systems within the home, central vacuum. It was expanding out that way. And when I did the power tool accessories, it was actually innovating products
Hmm.
and really doing things that were significantly different than what anybody else had done, and gave us the ability to displace somebody like a Black& Decker who owned the market at that time of power tool accessories. And we were knocking out 8, 12, 16-foot programs at major retailers very quickly because of the new products we brought. And then when I went to Cisco, same thing. We started doing things very different. The company when I went there was a trading company that had done a lot of different products. We were doing faucets, we were doing wood toolboxes, and safes was something that he was selling under the Protector brand. The changer there was going out and getting a brand. I initially had the idea to get the Brinks brand and started calling them. And I actually logged it, and it was over 500 phone calls trying to pursue Brinks to get them to license their name. And once they licensed their name, everything changed for us. And then we grew and we grew and we grew, and there's a whole sidelong story. But as we expanded, Brinks wanted to do some changes too. But when we wanted to go international, the Brinks name was not very strong. So we did a shift and we got the Honeywell brand name.
Hmm.
So again, that was under my leadership also that we switched it to Honeywell. And when we did that, we were able to maintain every account. So that was a big shift also. So doing things like that. So there's, products you offer, innovation that you put into products, markets that you go after, branding. It can be substantial. Doing that through licensing. And I had another interim thing that I had done with a Canadian company where I did a lot of licensing. And, so there's all kinds of way, and it can be processes. It's, I try to look at every company that I was at, and I think in every one of them, we probably made some major changes in processes. Simple things from, the whole supply chain, from where you get your product, how you receive your product, how you pay for that product, how you ship it out, how you bill it, all those things. How do you keep improving your fill rate cycle, your return level, and you find the key metrics that you want to measure in your business, and not too many of them. That would be one thing that I would say. Pick your 3 or 4 areas that are of greatest concern and put incentives on those 3 or 4 areas. Get those fixed.
Hmm.
Once you have those where they become routine, then you find another 3 or 4 and you go after those. And that's just, and as people start feeling success, they want to buy in and they want to do it.
Yeah.
So,
And you mentioned there a lot about licensing products, and it seems
yes,
like that was the key to kind of the success of that business.
correct.
How important is a brand then?
Um, well, it's very expensive to build a brand. I would say with e-com, I think brands are less valuable. because you can tell a story with an e-commerce sale where you can use video and different things to say things. It's hard to do that on a shelf in a package when somebody's going to pass by and you get them for 3 to 5 seconds. When they go online, they're going to be more engaged. So I think it's becoming easier to get away from brands, but then I would look at product specific opportunities. So if you're in security, and when I went back to school, so after I'd done sales for a while and I'd looked to buy that company, I went back and I got my MBA at a Pepperdine. And when I went back and I looked at it, I did my capstone project on the global safe market. And I did a lot of consumer research. And one of the things that I learned is when it comes to a security product where a person is going to put their own valuables in it, brand is much more important. Because now I want to know that what I bought that for, it's going to use. And I may not be as comfortable with it if it's an off brand Chinese product versus a well known American brand, even if it is made in China. I'm going to have more comfort with that brand.
Mm.
So, but if I was selling, a widget, I don't think the brand matters. It's going to be more about price.
Yeah. So, Bob, you talking about innovation, but
Yes.
innovation in a very traditional products like safes.
Yes.
That's probably very challenging.
Well, it's funny you say that. So I look at innovation probably different from a lot of people, and I think this is substantial. So the first big innovation I did on a safe, to take for example, I put fingerprint biometric technology on the lock on a safe. So biometric technology was not new, but nobody in the consumer market had put it on a safe where you could sell it at a reasonable price point for a consumer. So we launched that at a show in Chicago. And when I did that, and I remember that year very well, every major media in Chicago, the news stations, saw it. We had put a 1950, I don't remember what year, Brinks armored truck in our booth. We launched the Brinks Safe program. We had a biometric safe there. And all the news stations are having me go in the morning before the show, free of charge. We're not paying for this because they thought it was the most innovative thing at the show. So again, it wasn't anything new, but we did it
Mhm.
differently. So that's a great example. I'll go back to the saw blade. So this was another one. I'm sitting with an engineer, and we're talking about why does a carbide blade, where's the expense of it? Well, it's got 17 teeth. Most of them had 17 at the time, entry level. Well, why do you need 17 teeth? Well, if you don't, it cuts rough, and you may have problems with throat teeth, this and that. Well, how much is the tooth cutting? So I'm asking all these questions. And I said, well, why do you have to cut? Why couldn't you shave if you think like a razor blade? Can't you just shave the wood? I said, I don't know. So he built a prototype tooth or a blade where he built a ramp that went up to the tooth and it just exposed the tip of the tooth only. So instead of exposing the whole tooth, it was the tip. We put 4 blades on it. We changed the world. So at that point, carbide teeth were being hand brazed on and it was very expensive with labor. To do only 4 teeth instead of 17 teeth and be able to price that at the same price as a steel blade and have it last 10 times longer than a steel blade, it was a remarkable change. But again, the idea came from a razor, not from anything ingenious. And
Amazing.
then once we did that, we did the same technology on a hole saw. So we had a single tooth hole saw, where a carbide hole saw was very expensive. Steel ones didn't last very long, so we did it on a carbide one. When the cordless power tools came out, we developed an entire line of accessories that were geared for low voltage, battery operated tools. So if you do a blade, if I have a thick blade and I'm going through wood, I'm going to use a lot more energy than if I do a thin curved blade with a sharper tooth configuration to cut it
Mhm.
quicker. So we did things that take less power to accomplish the same project. And we could do it to drill bits, we could do it to saw blades, and we could quantifiably show those differences. And don't lose all this on these changes because if we talk later about the tariffs, this is going to tie back to that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So don't forget some of these. So everywhere you go, so yeah, on a safe, when I did my research, fascinating. Between water, fire, and theft damage, what do you think is the greatest?
Fire.
Okay, what would be number two?
Probably water.
And number three would be burglary.
Yeah.
So you're probably skewed a little bit to Australia. You don't have as many burglaries as what we probably do in America. America, most people would probably say burglary, fire, and then water. The number one in most countries is water. That you will have more water damage in a home than what you will fire theft. And when you think of water, it's not just floods. It's not because you got high rising water or storms or this, that. It's broken pipes, and other things. So there's a lot of factors. But if you look at most insurance statistics, will show you that most claims filed will be more because of water than theft or fire. So we did the first fire safe when we introduced the very first fire safe that was also waterproof. So we did that. And then in a fire safe, one of the things that people say about fire safes is, you can't, people can just pick them up and walk away with them because if you put a hole through it to bolt it down, well, you're no longer going to have your fire protection or your water.
Yeah.
So what did we do? We created a patented process where we could bolt down ours. We give you the bolt kit and everything, and you can bolt it down, and it maintains its waterproof and fire protection integrity. You don't jeopardize it whatsoever, and you're able to bolt down your product. So it's little things like that that, you could probably name a product to me right now that I could probably come up with some pretty quick ideas how to innovate it and change it. And it's actually a fun game to do with kids. I taught a few classes at Pepperdine, and I used to do that. And we would, put them in the hot seat to come up with changes of what you might do. But I've got ideas that I don't have time for that I know people could go make money on. I'll give you two really good ones. So one, take a toilet seat, and bidet toilet seats are becoming very big in America for both men and women. And take that seat and work with some medical company and have it analyze urine. So when you sit on the toilet seat, you'll quickly be able to identify the person because of the weight. Through urine, you're going to find some of the early stages of all kinds of things, cancer and a lot of other things. Have it do a monthly urine sample, and if there's any concerns, go see your doctor. So it's not going to be the end all there, but I think it's a great way to do something where you can bring that technology is there today, easy to do. Another one, swimming pools are big in Australia. They're big in
Mm-hmm.
America too. And pool cleaners make a lot of money, don't they? They
Mm-hmm.
come out and all they do is dump chlorine and chemicals in it. Okay. What do they do to figure out what chemicals they have to put in? They just take a little water test and they know what they have to put in, right? You also use creepies to clean up some of the leaves on the bottom, right? And keep your pool clean. And if you have sharp corners and stuff, the creepy many times gets stuck in those corners where it might get plugged with leaves or whatever. So why not come up with an app where on my phone, just like a game, when my creepy, the vacuum in the pool, gets stuck, it alerts me and I can go on and it's got a couple little thrusters on it. And just like a game through, Bluetooth technology at home, I could sit there and I could thrust it out of a stuck corner. I could clear it leaves and I could do everything. That same water as it's going through the filter, why not measure that water then, figure out what chemicals you need, and with those chemicals, have a service that it gets delivered maybe twice a week. You could be on it twice a week during the summer. And now, rather than spiking your pool with chemicals once a week and having the chlorine real high and having all your children get itchy, and I know in Australia you use a lot of salt pools, we're doing more and more, but with the old chlorine pools, this is just a brilliant way, a simple thing, technology that's there today, very easy to do, and somebody could go do that and make millions. So
So,
there's two ideas for people to go get rich.
Bob, I
Yes.
mean, we had hundreds of this similar kind of talks about
Yeah.
the innovation. How do you, when you coming up with the idea, how do you look at innovation? Like you looking at problems or looking at more of opportunity side?
Look at both. I tend to try and, if I'm working with a specific product, I really try to understand how the user is using it and what are they using it for. So I think a really good example would be, and I use this one a lot when I used to teach too. When I was a kid, I had to trim the grass along the fence in the backyard. And when I was real young, we had a little hand snip, little tiny blades, and we had a big yard. And it would take me like 2 or 3 hours to go around the yard cutting this stupid grass. Half the time the snipper wouldn't use, and I'd pull the grass. I'm sweating. I don't like this at all. Finally, my dad gets a longer clipper, and the blade's, now about this long. So this cuts my time down probably 50%. It doesn't cut it down to a third, but it's probably 50%. It's better, but it's still taking me a long time. And it's not a fun job to be down on your knees, crawling around the grass, bugs biting you and everything else. Well, those two products, you went up a little bit in price. People were agreeable to do that. Well, most people say that you can't increase the price a lot, but I say it all has to do with what you're getting for that money, the value. So somebody comes out with a weed whacker, line trimmer. You can go around with that line trimmer and do that whole yard in 10, 15 minutes. What a game changer. At the time, the little clip, the small clipper I used was about a $5 item. The bigger ones, the shears, were about 15. The weed whacker was about 100. So willing to spend that money because time value. So that's a really good one. I think that's an easy one to see as a user. Give me a better way to do it because I don't want to be on my knees cutting. But any product I think you look at, it's how can I help you do the job faster? How can I make it function better for you? So I can look at the product. But the other thing to look at is the process. So where is the product made? How does it get from point A to its eventual location? Can you innovate the process? Which, Jam, I know you've done that within your business. But I think that's a lot of it is you don't just look at products, but you look at the whole supply chain too.
Mm-hmm.
But I tend to go out and I'll look at, what people use, how they use it, the time it takes. How can I help in that whole equation?
Mm-hmm.
Simple ways to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I really think innovation can be taught also. I
Mm-hmm.
don't think that it's simply, some people have a gift of it, but I
Yeah.
think you can also teach it to get people to understand how to look for opportunities.
Yeah. Yeah. And apart from innovation, one of the key strengths that you have is sales, right? We talked about the sales skills. And I've been to a few sales meeting with you, and I've seen how you operate. Like, you more build relationship, right? Like you.
Absolutely.
So my question is, Bob, how important when you're talking to a potential customer to build that relationship more than trying to get that transaction like a deal?
So I'm going to take a step backwards and I'm going to say more people have to be strategic about who they want to partner with, or if you want to use the term sell, because not everybody is a good fit to be your customer. So I think you have to start with that premise. And you need to look out there, okay, with what we do and how we do it, who would be good partners for us? And then you need to find the right voice to get to share that idea. But it's not selling. To me, it is that relationship. So if I can come out and tell you that I have a product that can work better, that's like, price is the easy. Product that does better, that's another easy. The relationship is the hard one. And the relationship is built out. One of the things that I always look at, I try to find out how is the person that I'm going to go try to get this relationship with, how are they compensated? So, what would be a win for them? And usually, a win for them is they get accolades, they get promotions, they make more money, things like that. So, how can I help them in their business accomplish the things that they want to accomplish? And if I help them do that, I'm not only going to be good then, but wherever they go and the higher levels they go to. And I work with people now that I worked with 40 years ago
Mm-hmm.
that, they're still in the business and I'm in the business and, you run into them at shows and this and that. It's fun to see that. But that's because it was a relationship where you weren't worried as much about me and the commission or the money I'm going to make. It's more about the other person. And if you take that approach, the more you make them win, you will also win.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what people forget. They try to start out selfishly about themselves and everybody's giving quotas and this and that. You got to get over that. You need to start looking at how do I help them? Because if I help them, I'm going to help me.
Mm-hmm.
And I suppose, Bob, we've spoken a lot about the innovation side of things, but you've also clearly done a lot in growing and scaling businesses. What do you think are the key levers that businesses can pull to kind of scale their operations?
Scaling is one of the most difficult things. So as you scale a business, you hit plateaus that are difficult. Change are difficult for workers. So I think one of the things you have to realize, you really value your employees. And employees are very important, but some employees are really good in a business that has 10 people and they're an important player. But when you grow that business and they have to take a lesser role, sometimes that's hard for them. And sometimes you have to weed out some of those early people that helped you really progress because it's not a good fit for them anymore. But if you do that, try to take care of them, try to help them find the right fit for them. But I think one thing that you have to do is you have to really look at where you're going and what you need to get there and get the right people to do it. So change is hard. Having the right people, I think, is critical. You always have to do that, and you always have to be looking to improve with your people. Hopefully, you don't need to get rid of some, but if you do, don't hesitate because it doesn't get easier later, it just gets harder. So I would say that. Um, the other things that I would say is focus on the areas as a leader where there's more challenges. So I think that's the biggest thing is it's easy to go after the easy things. But
Mhm.
where you see where people are having complications or they're struggling in areas, where can you go there to help them? How can you really get your hands dirty and step in and not make it you, give them the credit, but using your experience and lead them in a way where they can actually get it resolved. And I think that just makes it much, much better if you're able to do that.
Mhm.
So again, being a servant leader,
Yeah,
I would
yeah,
say, more
yeah.
than anything, a servant
S-
leader.
So, Bob, in relation to the growth, um, I have a question, right? So, when you're a small business, you have that entrepreneurial mindset. You do everything, in like a very entrepreneurial way, and like a
Hmm.
founder's mindset.
Sure.
And as the business grow, you're getting like more people involved, more process involved, and that founder's mindset, losing founder's mindset can be quite dangerous, right? Like, so
Yes.
how important to maintain that, and how do you do that?
So that's the $1 million question because I haven't figured that one out. Every time I've gotten a company, in the, just shy of 100 million,
Yeah,
50 million to 100 million, I exit.
yeah,
So,
yeah. It's a
so
challenging.
I go
Yeah.
find another place to go because I realize that my strengths no longer align with that company.
Mm-hmm.
So for me to be happy, I have to be in an environment that allows me to still do those, early business development, innovation, changes. That's what feeds me. So I
That's
need
the
to be around.
exciting part, right?
So what I would say is to somebody in a company, if you're able to create new divisions. So the last company I was in, when I started it, we were a separate division. We basically came in as a skunk works. So the company was Lewis Hyman Inc. They were doing, um, let's say they were doing door locks, they were doing shelving products, they were doing window treatments, so all those categories. And when I had left um, Honeywell, it was because I had been trying, so Honeywell Safes, I had been trying to acquire the business and buy it with some outside people. That's part of the reason why I went back and got my MBA. As I said, look, I understand this business, but when I'm going out and discussing things with the financial world, I'm not understanding their terminology. So I have to understand better how to present this, how to go get money. So for me, the MBA was invaluable. But as I went through the process and everything, and it didn't work out, I ended up leaving that company because in the beginning, we were separated out. As we grew, they folded us into the other entity. And all of a sudden, what I did, how I did it, it all changed. And I did not have any fun. I was
Mm-hmm.
miserable. So, long story short, I don't even know if you know that part of my career,
Mm-hmm.
but that happened just a little over a year ago that they actually let me go. So I brought Honeywell safes to them.
Mm-hmm.
They had never been in that category. I brought it to them. I built it. We were doing almost $40 million between safe, store locks, everything. So we went 0 to 40 million in about 10 years. And then they fire me. So, which was kind of a shock to me. But when I went to them and I told you that I had had Honeywell before, and when I left that company, because I had tried to buy it and the price kept going up as we were growing the business. So I got frustrated. I don't know if he fired me or I quit, whatever, but I was out of there. So I left. He lost most of the main key customers. And when he did, he panicked. He lost Menards, he lost Walmart, he lost Target. So his business was down almost 60%. He panicked. He had the Honeywell brand. He panicked and he sold it to First Alert. And he told First Alert, you can go to the market with a dual brand strategy. You could use Honeywell at Lowe's and you could use First Alert at Home Depot. So he gave him that strategy. Sounds good on paper, that's great, but he never made sure that Honeywell was okay with that. And Honeywell said no. So Honeywell ended up coming back to me and they gave me the opportunity to start it. And that's when I went to the Lewis Hyman Inc. company. Then
Mm-hmm.
10 years later, Lewis Hyman Inc. fires me after we built it. So I leave. Well, guess what happened about 30, 60 days after that? First Alert comes to me and they said, you remember that company that we bought and it didn't do so well? Well, we're not really wanting to stay in the category anymore. Would you like that company back? So I didn't. So that company I tried to buy, I didn't have to buy it. They handed it to me. So we used
Wow.
to take it over and run it. So we started that about a year ago, and today we're now selling into Australia, and we're selling into Malaysia and Philippines, and we're in China selling, and we're in multiple countries. We're growing it rapidly, and when I went
Amazing.
to the company that I went to, I didn't plan on this coming. They do a lot of different products. I thought this is going to be fun. We're going to do golf carts. We're going to do tiny homes, and we're going to. So we had all kinds of other products. I said this is going to be fun. Next thing I know, I'm back in the safe business, but it's okay.
Can
So
never escape, Bob.
you can't. But again, I guess that says a lot of good things. Factories are coming back to me.
Yeah.
People who I know, and it's because you don't burn your bridges. You take care of people and you put
Mm-hmm.
people
Mm-hmm.
first. And if you do that, then good things will happen long term.
And plus, you have friends globally, right? So
Yeah,
it's quite
exactly.
easy. You have that systems already set. So pretty much
Yeah,
you have to repeat what were you doing before, right?
yeah, and what gets hard, and I'm sure understand it very well too, that when you go start that next opportunity, it takes an incredible amount of time, and a lot of times the people that helped you get where you were the last time, you haven't had time to get back out to them. And you have to get your business to a certain place before you can start going to the other ones. But by the way, we are selling into Australia. We sell
Mm-hmm.
into Bunnings through somebody, but I think there's other opportunities out there, and we should talk.
We
So
look forward to
yeah,
seeing you
yeah,
soon in Sydney. Yeah.
absolutely, yeah, yeah.
And Bob, I remember very clearly one of my very vivid memories of you, Bob, was when you were last here in Sydney. We were sitting out in the lounge room and you were talking about the future. And it was something that I really love about you. And we were talking about the futures in 3D printing. We were talking about graphene. We were talking about all these things,
Good
which
memory. I like
as a
that.
young child, I was like so keen and latched onto it. I want to know now, what do you think are the big things for the future?
3D printing right now. A lot of the time, AI certainly. So
Yeah.
if there's anything, AI is going to change this world. Hopefully, we do it in a responsible way globally, because the data that you put into it will have a lot on what comes out of it. And you can skew that data and you could do very bad things with it. And I think some of those things are already happening, so we need to control it. But I think if there's any big change, that's probably the biggest. You're going to see with nanotechnology and medical, you're going to see some incredible things, I think, coming up. You still have 3D printing. I went recently, we're remodeling our house right now. And, we're looking at some cabinet hardware. And I'm just sitting there in my mind and I'm thinking, okay, this store has probably 50 different knobs that you could choose. They probably have 20 to 40 pieces of each one, which probably isn't enough to do most kitchens if you want to redo your kitchen. So you're still going to have to order some. And if you think of the warehouses and the supply chain of product you have back at factories on ships across the water and warehouses across your country and around the globe, it's crazy. You could have a 3D printer and you could be printing that. Think of the Kinkos. Did you have Kinkos in Australia? You did, didn't you? Kinkos copy machines. Who,
Oh
who
yeah,
was your
yeah, yeah.
who
Yep.
was your
Yep.
copy place? When you want to go make photocopies as a kid, where'd you go?
We now go to like
Office works
Snap,
or something.
Office Work, Snap,
Okay, when you were a
printing.
kid, where did you go? What would it have been?
Kinko, yeah, yeah. I remember
You
what
had
the
Kinkos,
brand. Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So back in the day, you had Kinko's and you go do your black and white photo. And if you wanted to do a color print, then you'd have to go. So eventually you couldn't even do color prints. But when you could do color prints, you'd go out to get them done.
Hmm.
Then all of a sudden you started getting color printers at home, and you could do color printers or photographs very well, and you didn't need to go do that unless you were doing large runs. I think the next big change is going to be where you're going to get that 3D printer because you can now go places to 3D print, but that printer is going to start entering the homes within the next couple of years. And I think that's just going to grow and grow. And like I know U.S. military now out on the battlefield, they used to have to take spare parts for all the tanks and trucks and everything they had. Now they take a 3D printer. It can print bolts high enough quality, grade 8 quality, where you can use them in, the big machinery and tanks and trucks and everything else. So I think that's going to revolutionize. When I think of the world I deal with and the product market, I think that's the big one. So
On-demand manufacturing.
I
absolutely.
actually, I actually seen that. I actually remember you when I saw that as one of our one of our suppliers, Philips Lighting. They do
Okay.
all these Signify Lighting. They do all these lampshades and things like that. They all 3D printed on demand,
Yes.
and they have
Fabulous.
the whole area of like the
Print farm.
print farm,
Yeah.
and it's amazing. And what exactly what you're predicting many years back, so it's happening. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would also say, have you been to the dentist lately? Have you needed a crown?
No.
I had a
Hopefully.
crown long time ago. Yeah.
Yeah, but when you needed it, they took your tooth out, they put in a temporary, and they took measurements and they had to order it.
Yep.
Today, you can go to the dentist who has a 3D printer. They will print your replacement tooth on the spot and install it, and it will fit better than the one that they would have ordered.
Amazing.
So there's things like this, and it's changing so rapidly, and you're going to continue to see that. So I think, again, when we talk about innovation, it's thinking about those changes. You go to a CES show in Las Vegas, it's a great one to see changes, but what are the
Yep.
changes, and how can you incorporate those changes into your business or create new businesses to take advantage of those? So when I look at the old Kinko stores, if I were young, I would probably start up a chain of stores that would start using 3D printers. So you come get familiar with the 3D printer because eventually what's going to be valuable is going to be those things that you print with, the powdered metals and different materials. So if you become the place that they get used to for 3D printing, you can start selling them their first printers, but then you get locked in to become the one that's going to get them the printing supplies.
Mm-hmm.
So the ink, as you want to call it,
Yeah.
even though it's not ink, but you start doing that, you've got a real big business there.
Mm-hmm.
That's a multi-million dollar, probably billion-dollar opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
If
Mm-hmm.
somebody started looking at it now, and they could do nothing more than take the Kinko's business model and duplicate it, because that's
Absolutely. Yeah.
what it is.
Yeah.
It's at the infancy stage of what Kinko's did.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that's a lot of it is looking at our world. How is it changing? What's going on? And how can you capitalize on those opportunities and do that in a responsible way?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we've looked at kind of what's next for the future. But Bob, what's next for you?
Well, I before I go there, can I talk about tariffs just a little bit? I don't know
Oh
what
yeah,
Right.
for sure.
So I just want to go back. So go back to the early 80s when I said I went to work for that company that had 20 manufacturing facilities. And what I did was work with them, and they had at every one of those factories, they had engineers. And every year we're bringing out new products every single year. We're innovating, we're doing things different, we're making products work faster, longer, better, less expensive, whatever it was. We're doing everything we can do. Well, as the market went and Chinese products started coming into America and around the globe, those factories started closing because we couldn't compete on price. And I think retailers were the biggest fault because they started looking at price as everything. And what happened is the manufacturer said, okay, we'll go do factories over in foreign countries. We'll have them make commodities and we'll bring it back. The innovation that's been done in the last, I'll say from 80 to now has been more US driven for probably all but maybe the last 5 years. US companies will say we want to do this, they'll help tool, design, whatever. But the Chinese are coming very good at that. They are being very good. So when I look at the tariffs now, what's going on with America, We in America, and I think many countries, really benefited from the low cost manufacturing. We were able to get multiple TVs, we were able to get
Hmm.
electronics. You know, when I think as a kid, I played with one pair of tennis shoes. I could go running, I could play basketball, football. It didn't matter, one pair. Now I need a different pair for everything I'm going to do. If I'm going to
Hmm.
go weeding, I need a pair. If I want to go hiking, it's a different pair. If I want to go play tennis, it's a different pickleball. It's even a different one. You know, so it's kind of crazy. So we all benefited from that low cost manufacturing, but it did shut down the factories and it shut down a lot of the innovation and the mindsets that we had in countries outside of China. So when I was a kid, I worked with tools. My dad had a garage and we had a set of tools and I would build things. And I would build boats and I would build planes and I would build all kinds of things, motorized and not. But that got the mind going. And we took shops out of our schools. They don't have metal shop, they don't have wood shop, they aren't creating things. They're doing bookwork. And we need to get back to that creative mindset at an early age with children. We have to start developing that. So one of the things I'm doing on my home right now is I'm building a shop on the side. And I have a dream that in retirement, I'm going to bring kids in here and I'm going to teach them how to use tools. I just think that that's so important. But when I look at the tariffs, I think China has become very strong and now they have enough money. We don't need to be subsidizing their economy. So they have to play fair and allow products to go back to their country from other countries at a reciprocal price, whatever that might be. And I think that that's just really important for the world. And I think some Americans get it. I don't think many do, but I think this is important for the world right now is to balance trade a lot more because there is not another country with 1 billion people willing to work at next to nothing. India might be the next best bet, but their economy is growing rapidly. They're looking for higher and higher wages, and as people look at the internet and they look at the value of something, they say, "Look, I get paid $1 for making this, but it sells in America for 50. This
Hmm.
isn't right." So the balancing act has to happen a little bit more. So you have to have free trade going around the world, and I think let free markets flow. I
Hmm.
think that's very important.
So how this going to impact you? Like, majority of your stuff currently manufactured probably in China.
My whole career has been basically about China. I
Yeah,
do
yeah.
get some things out of Vietnam, and I have South
Vietnam.
Korea, and I have done some things out of India, and I've done some things out of, so yeah, we can go do those. But honestly, right now, I'm in discussions with somebody about bringing some production back to America. We're trying to see if we can do it, cost effectively. So the question is if we can do it, and if we're within 10%, will retailers in America pay 10% more for an American-made product? Or they just mouthing off right now and they won't back it. So we hope to find out soon, and see if we can actually do this. And hopefully within the next 18 months, we have a factory built in America where we're going to be making some safes. So,
If that's the case, though, does that not mean that the tariffs have worked by
well,
the
that's
way
what I'm
that he
saying.
wanted to?
I think that that's part of it. But the reason why you don't make in America, so I'll give you an example. Safe that I sold under the Honeywell brand, okay? Made in China. If you take US dollars and convert RMD into US dollars, the exact same safe sells more in China as a Chinese made product because their tax system and their premium brand penalties that they have than what it sells for in the US. So it's
Mm.
about 20% higher for the identical product when you convert it to US dollars. Everybody making the same margins to sell that same safe in China, even though it was made in China, for selling it in the US. How is that right?
Yeah, yeah.
That's not right. It's a Chinese made product, but because it had an American brand,
Mm.
there were penalties paid. And that's not
Mm.
right.
Yeah.
That it should be a fair market.
Mm.
That's all I'm asking for. And if that happens, then stuff made in America, because there's so much stuff coming to China, containers coming to China cost 3 to 4 times what they cost to send a container to China. So being able to ship back to China, my goods go there very inexpensively. So the additional costs that I may have will be reduced because of the freight advantages that I'll have going back because of disproportionate trade. And the other thing that I'll say too, if there's anything that I really give credit to the Chinese, when we think of the manufacturing that we got rid of in most countries, we think of the sweatshops. I remember when we made our first safes in China. I'm not kidding you. There were literally people sitting on stools and there is a wet cement mix, and they're taking ladles and they're filling their ladle and they're pouring it into a funnel that's above the safe cavity. And that's how they were filling them. We would fill, 4 or 5 thousand of those a day that way with hundreds of workers. Crazy. Well, today that's all automated.
Mm.
So they have found ways to automate things, the same things that we would have done, but back in the day, the labor was so cheap they could do it. Well, their labor is not that cheap anymore, so they've gotten very good at automating and putting systems and processes and everything in their factories. And
Mm.
we've required a lot of that of them as we've tried to drive down their cost. But we're
Mm.
at a point now with automation. I believe it's an opportunity for the world now that yes, the Chinese are good, but I believe if we bring it back to our own countries, that we could do it even better than them, that there's still levels of improvements out there to be made. And
Mm.
I challenge the world to do that to make the
Yeah.
playing
So
field more fair here for
yeah. So
everybody.
this is your perspective, but how's
Yes.
the rest of the American feel about this tariff?
I think most Americans were in favor of it until their 401ks and investments started getting hit. And
Mm.
then as soon as you start seeing the financial hurt, you start getting a little bit, I'm not so sure about this. And I think it's going to be who cries wolf first. Will it be China or America?
Yep.
I think China is in more pressure right now than America. But unfortunately, I don't believe that President Trump understands how to negotiate with Chinese.
Mm.
I think that's the problem. We both need the change. The Chinese still need the American market. They're getting containers shut down now. Most retailers have shut off containers from China. Most suppliers, we're not taking it. So you've got a glut at factories, you've got a glut at their ports, you've got people not getting paid, you have factories that are going to have to start shutting. So are they going to blink first or are we going to blink first because our 401ks are down? I
Mm.
think China's going to have to blink first. But unfortunately, the U.S. has backed Xi into a corner. And the last thing that a Chinese person wants to do, in my opinion, from experience working with them, is to be backed in a corner and forced to make a decision. They don't want to be told how to do this. We have
Mm-hmm.
to give them a way out. We have to give them a way to negotiate where it looks like they won something too. They
Mm-hmm.
can't have to cave and cower to us and give us what we want.
Mm.
That will never happen.
Mm.
She will go down fighting, and he's already said that. He'll go down fighting to the
Mm.
end,
Mm. Mm.
until he's taken out of power, the people revolt, whatever. But that will get to a bad situation in the world if it gets down to that.
Mm.
So hopefully, smart heads get together and figure a way to resolve this where it will benefit everybody. And it can be a phase-in process. It doesn't have to be overnight.
Mm.
But we have to get closer to getting an even playing field across the globe.
Mm.
Which way?
Thank you for sharing this. It's interesting, trending topic. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very, very important to all of us. So I'm
Mm.
in favor of the tariffs. Yet personally, it could cost me my whole income
Mm.
and my
Yeah.
savings and everything else. But I believe it is the right thing for the world, not just America. I
Mm.
think that we have to get the Chinese on a level playing field. Very, very important. So,
So, Bob, back to the question, Dylan's question. What's the plan for Bob?
so for Bob, so I'm really having fun. So when I got let go of my last company, there is a person in Mississippi that I was introduced to, family business, and they have multiple businesses. So they have one company that's liquidation and closeouts. They have another company that does a lot of e-commerce. They do giftables. They actually manufacture air compressors, generators, pressure washers. We just got into golf carts. We're doing tiny homes. So a lot of different products. So what they wanted me to do is help teach the kids and bring them up to speed so this business will transfer to the next generation smoothly. So I'm helping them grow a lot of ways. So educate the next generation, expand the business globally, get some businesses that are more recurring revenue because a lot of their business was liquidation, closeout. Now, whatever I can buy, I can sell, but when it's gone, I'm done. So
Mm.
how can you get recurring revenue, the safe business, things like that? So
Mm.
I'm doing that and I'm having a lot of fun. And I see doing that for another, probably 5 years. We might start a factory. So I'm enjoying that. After that, I'm on the side, I've already started the ability to be a consultant for trading.
Mhm.
So I've
Yeah.
got a lot of contacts around the world. I can help with product development. I can help with ideas on trading, different things like that. So I want to continue to do that. That also allows me to travel, which I love to do. So I can
Yep.
come see people like you in Australia or friends around the world. And then the other thing that I mentioned that I said is that with the remodel we're doing, I love to do woodworking and just use my hands and do things and have created a lot of things around this, the property that I live on now. But I'm building a side shop and I have a lot of tools and I want to teach kids how to use their hands.
Mm.
Since it was taken out of the schools, I'm just gonna, do whatever I can to get kids and help do that and be a
Awesome.
way of giving back. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I look
that's the
forward to coming
future.
visiting your shop one day, Bob.
Absolutely. You pick something you want to make and we'll build it. So I remember your pallet furniture. You actually
Oh yeah.
won an award for that. I remember that. That was
Yeah, I've got a lot more projects to show you next time you come over.
still out
But
of pallets or you using
no,
real
no,
wood?
I've upgraded. I've upgraded.
Okay. So woodworking or
Yeah, yeah,
okay. So send me some pictures of what you built. I'd love
Oh
to
yeah.
see it. Yeah.
will
Yeah.
do. Well,
'Cause
Bob, we've
thank
um we've cracked over more than an hour, which has just flown by, and you've had a incredible story. But I
yeah.
suppose looking back on your journey, do you feel successful?
Yeah, because I have a lot of people that I love dearly
Yeah.
that I know I can pick up a phone and call and go see and have a relationship with that isn't just business. And
Mhm.
that to me, at the end, it's the people we know. It's the journey we've been on and the people that have helped us. It's not the businesses we built. It's not the money we made. It's the people.
Absolutely.
The rest of it you can't take with you. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's those memories. So yeah, I feel very good about where I've been. And like I said, now it's more about giving back. And I'll leave you with one final thought
Yep.
that I think if there's anything that I can say to anybody, and it was taught to me by somebody, but be intentional as to where you put your attention every day,
Mm.
everything you do. Don't waste time because that's the one thing that you can't get back. So be intentional as to where you put your attention.
I love that, Bob. I think that's a good place to end. And throughout our discussion, I've been jotting down a few things which I think have been traits which you've shown, which have been part of your successful life, and I'd like to share them. The
Okay?
first one is I think you're incredibly relationship driven. We've heard relationship all throughout this conversation, and I think in really putting emphasis and attention on building strong relationships, it helps you down the line as well. It might not be a short term thing. The deal might not get done this time, but later down the line, an opportunity pops up. And as you said, this isn't also just about business. It's
Right.
the people that we meet along the way.
And relationships are helping even when you don't necessarily benefit.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then the next one is you're always looking for opportunities.
Yeah.
Like whether it was when you were pulling those cables, you thought, "What else can I pull?"
Yeah.
Throughout all of these different discussions that we went through, you always had your eyes open and looking for opportunities, looking to see where you could improve. And I think that comes into your kind of innovator's mindset as well. You're always looking at problems and looking at current solutions and seeing how can I do something better. And I think that's really, really helped you along your journey. The next one is you're incredibly authentic. Like it's so easy to connect with you and talk with you. And I think that's potentially part of the reason why you're so good at sales as well and build such strong relationships is you show up as yourself. You have no shame in being who you are. And it makes it a lot easier to connect and communicate with you. And then the last one is you're a continuous learner. Whether it was you realized that you didn't have the right lingo to do a merger and acquisition deal, so you went back and got your MBA. Whether it's going into all of these different situations, putting yourself in these situations to try and learn about different products, and it's so clear that you're a futurist and you're always learning about the next thing that's coming. And I think that's something which I definitely respect a lot about you.
And add to that Dylan's list, Bob, your storytelling capability, like your ability to tell stories. We could sit here, we could talk hours. We don't even know the hours will go. I mean,
Right.
we had several chats. We had the opportunity to spend a lot of time together here and there. I mean, it's such an enjoyable. That storytelling ability is one of your key traits for your success because of that ability, you become a friend of very first times
Anyone,
when
yeah.
you someone when you talk to someone, and I think that's a really, really key strength that I actually uh, kind of trying to follow, what that ability, something that I learned
I'm
from
not
you,
a follower. You're a leader in that too.
Yeah,
So
thank you, but
don't take
you're the
yourself short.
master.
Yes.
You're the
Yeah.
master, yeah. And it's a pleasure talking to you, Bob. I know we could always talk longer, and it was really nice to see you. And looking forward to having you in Sydney very soon.
Thank you so much. And I just want to tell you that thank you for what you guys are doing, not just with me on this, but I think this is very valuable for a lot of people. I think it's a great program and it's a great idea. So please continue it. And then to you guys with the friendships, again, I know that if I go to Australia, I can call you and it will be just like I was
Absolutely,
there yesterday. And the same thing if you come here, you always have a place to stay, things like that. And I think that's the beauty of business is not making it business, but it's the people. So,
absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely.
a great summary. And thank you for all the kind words. I appreciate it. So,
Thank you so much for your time. And if people have found something useful from today's episode, if you could do us a favor and go and subscribe or follow us on whichever platform you're listening to this on right now. And you can see all of our inspirational episodes over on our website, thequestforsuccesspodcast.com. And with that, we'll catch you guys in the next episode. Thanks for listening.
all right. Thank you so much.